the things I'm contributing really do make a difference, and I can see the output on the products that we're developing, which is a really cool feeling.
Aspire is actually quite powerful when it comes to this kind of thing, using two rail sweeps, being able to use a shape creation, using our sheets feature.
Hello everybody, my name is Michael Tyler, and today we're in my workshop where I'm going to show you some of the tools that I use to prepare surfaces prior to applying a finish. And in addition, I'm going to give you a sneak preview of some finishing techniques that I've been experimenting with the idea of incorporating those techniques into some of the free Vectric projects to be released in the future. And also to introduce these finishing techniques to anyone new joining us today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Sometimes I'll go ahead and make my own custom tools when I'm preparing a surface for applying a finish and I need to get into tight spots or corners or whatever. So you can see here I've got various scraps of wood, even aluminum channel here where I've glued some sandpaper on there, various grits for various jobs. Even have this curved half dowel where I've glued some sandpaper on there for getting into some coved areas and such. Even something like this where it just improves your leverage to get into a tight corner. Even took some foam sandpaper and glued it on the end of a dowel in this sort of pointed triangular shape just to get into an area, and also give that give for if it's a curved 3D surface, that would make it easier to kind of conform to that surface. One of my favorite homemade tools for sanding is these emery files, nail files. I just clip off the end of that and make a nice point. So if I've got tight areas in a carving that I need to get into by hand, you make that point, and you can see here you can make it into a sort of an arrowhead, spearhead shape, or just that sharp corner. It makes it a lot easier to get into these tight areas if you need to get rid of some fuzzies there before you apply your finish. And plus it has the bonus of having two different grits, one on each side there. So that makes a really handy homemade tool. So I hope you'll take advantage of that idea, and don't be afraid to make your own custom tools to fit the job that is at hand. On some jobs, I'll go ahead and use these diamond files. You can get these online in sets or individually. They're not very expensive. I also use this stiff nylon denture brush to sort of brush away any loose fuzzies or sawdust in a carving before applying a finish. And a lot of you know that I like to use a diluted shellac or seal coat, which is a 100% wax-free shellac, diluted 50% with denatured alcohol, and let that set up a little bit, and it'll stiffen up any fuzzies that are remaining after your carving. And this brush will help get some of that away, and then you can go in and detail it either by hand or with a power tool that I'll show you in a bit. Some people do use these metal brushes. We've got the stainless steel one here, and sort of famous brass brush. I don't use these very often, particularly if it's a softer wood like radiated pine or poplar, which are about the same hardness, because they're just too aggressive, and sometimes the brass will even leave a color residue behind, which I don't like. But I suppose if you're using harder woods, walnut, cherry, things like that, these might be a little bit more appropriate. But I also like to use, on occasion, these Japanese, what they call Japanese finger files, and you can get these online as well. And one I use probably the most is this one, and they come in various shapes and configurations, but this one here is relatively small, and it's got a slight, I can get that in the camera there, a slight curvature to it. So the rough surface is the convex area, and then this is smooth, the concave surface. But you can get your finger right behind that to get some leverage in there if you really need to bear down on an area that you want to rough sand, and then you go back with a finer grit, sandpaper by hand, or with a fine tooth file. So these are some other tools that I will sometimes use to get into the small crevices there if I can't get it out with those emery board homemade tools like I showed you. There's another tool that I like to use from time to time, and that's these hand detail sanders from, I think I got these from Lee Valley, but you can get them, I believe, off Amazon as well as many other woodworking supplier places too. And you've got various grits. You've got 4 grits here, and you can buy the replacement belts. But one of the things I like about these particularly is you don't have to replace the belts very often, because you can remove the belt and rotate it to a fresh grit area. You can see I've done that several times with this particular grit. That's the coarsest grit right there. Oh, and I also found it handy to just put a marker of what grit each one of these uses. So that way it reminds me which grit is which. So if you want to just rotate this belt to a new, fresh surface for your sanding belt, these are spring-loaded, so you just press it down, rotate that belt like I did, and then slip it back on, and you've got a new, fresh surface for sanding. So you can use these for a certain amount of detail sanding. It won't get into super tight places, but it can be handy for this type of sanding, or on the edge like that. If you got some stubborn fuzzies in a corner like that, you can even use them to sand a bit on the edges of wood to remove tool marks. So these can be really, really handy. Another thing that I wanted to show you is from time to time, I've used these. I've had these for probably 10 years, maybe used them 4 or 5 times at the most. And if I have a super tight area where I need to get in with a rotary tool, like my Dremel, I'll use maybe one of these small, tiny bits to get in there into a tight spot. So you can get a whole set of these inexpensively. And you can see that if you really need to get into a super tight spot with your rotary tool, these can come in handy. So they're diamond coated, super cheap to purchase, and really handy. If you need it, you need it. So I thought I'd show you those additional tools there. Perhaps my favorite detail sander is one that I use with my Dremel tool, and that's equipped with these 3M 3/4 inch 80 grit sanding, or radial discs they call them. And I actually talked to the inventor of these several years ago. His name is Rick, and when he was at 3M, he invented this technology, and it's primarily for use for jewelers and for metal, and woodworking came as an afterthought sometimes years later. Anyway, these are great for sanding details in your carvings, your small carvings like that. And all you do is you stack 3 of these onto a mandrel, and then insert it into your Dremel tool, and then you can adjust your RPM suitable for whatever wood that you're carving, so you don't burn the wood. You don't need to apply a lot of pressure, let the tool do the work, and get it in there in those crevices that you would normally have to do by hand. Now, if there are some leftover fuzzies in an area where you can't get to with this, then you can use those emery boards or files or whatever, like I showed you before. So these have gone up in price a bit. I think they're around $16 for 12 of these, and you stack 3 on a mandrel. But they last quite a long time. Here's one that I've used, I guess, I don't know, 6 or 8 projects, and it's wearing down. It's a smaller diameter. You can see it's gradually wearing down. This is the newer one. This is the older one. But because these are embedded fully throughout the entire piece, the grit stays the same. So you can get this right down to the nub and it's still going to do the job for you. And then when you change them, just take this out, unscrew the mandrel holder, and install your 3 new stacked wheels on there. Of course, something like this, I know that some people have mentioned using flap sanders, but something like this, it's okay for large things, bowls, things like that, larger areas. But there's no way that this type of flap sander on a drill press or whatever is going to sand the details in a carving like this without damaging or smoothing over or losing detail of your carving. So these aren't really suitable for 3D carvings like that. But if you're going to use a power tool to speed the job up, then I would say that these 3M radial discs are the way to go. This is one of my favorite power tools. I use it quite a lot for a variety of different projects, and what I like about it is it's a spindle sander, so it's got these round spindle cylinders, and also the belt sander. So as it's running, it goes up and down and has the action of a belt sander. So it makes quick work of any straight edges. And then if you have any curved edges that you need to sand, these things are great, and they come with all kinds of different sizes. Here's another one of my favorite tools to use. It's a combination sander. It's a 1-inch sanding belt and also a disc sander on this side. So if you have any small pieces that need to be squared up with the disc sander, that's handy for that. And I like to use the belt sander for removing any tool marks along the edges of curved items like a round disc. So if you have watermarks like this 1-inch belt sander will remove them very, very quickly. So that's another often used tool. Here we see I've got a few sample boards that I've made up over a period of time that I use for reference, and I'll just take a scrap piece of wood that is the same wood that I'll be using in a project, just to get an idea of what that stain or finish is going to look like on a particular piece of wood. And this is, of course, nothing new. People do this all the time, do a sample on a piece that they need to, just determine what color is going to look like on a certain piece of wood. And I'll even use some of this mixture of steel wool dissolved in vinegar to age things like oak, which has a high tannin content. This reacts with the tannins in the wood and gives you that aged appearance. You can see on this side I put 1 coat of this mixture on this side of this oak, and on this side I put 2 coats, and then I applied a stain over it to see if I could make it look like a really old antique piece of oak, which dark oak, which it did, of course. So I'll keep these around just for reference. Again, this is not a new idea. People do this all the time, but just as a little tip for those who may have not thought of this or done this very much. These are really handy to have around the shop just for a reference for any of your future projects, what finish you'd like to apply. This is one of the finishes I've been experimenting with lately, and these are called color shift paints, meaning that depending on how the light hits them will reflect and shimmer different shade or color. You can tell on the lid here how it's shifting. Also the bottom of the bottle, sometimes you can get that light. It's hard to get on camera, but get that light to shift. Anyway, I did make several sample boards so I could see how they would react in different coatings and different layers and undercoatings and so on. And you can see here, depending how the light hits it, you get that color shift effect. One of the neat ones is this one here, this sort of a pink color here. If you hold this up just right, you can see how it shifts from sort of that reddish pink color to more of a purple color. So, oh, and this one right here, that is actually the black color shift paint. But when you hit it with the light, it turns more of a gold color. So that's kind of an interesting one. So depending on what you're applying it on and how thickly you apply it, will determine how much of that color shift you get. Now here's a sample board that I made, and then I clear coated everything. On this sample, I applied it over bare wood. This was just sealed with some 50/50 shellac and then sanded down a little bit. And then this half I stained and then applied the color shift paint over both of those areas just to see if it gave much of a different effect. And I did apply a clear coat over both of these. And even though you can still see some color shift, the clear coat, it really isn't necessary, and it does tend to diminish the color shifting qualities of this paint. So you don't have to clear coat over these anyway. They're indoor, outdoor rated. They hold up well, either indoors or outdoor, and you don't need any type of clear coating over them at all. Okay, let me show you how to utilize these color shift paints on a couple of projects. And both of these projects, this tissue box, the schnoz box, and this simple round box, were stained, and then the final clear coats applied and so on. So that's all ready to go. Both of these have a satin finish, and I can apply these color shift paints right over the top of this hummingbird flower and the schnoz box lettering there. Let me show you how that's done. Let me take the hummingbird away there. We'll start with the schnoz box, and we'll just pick out some colors here. And what I like to do with this is, of course, I've shaken these up a bit, but I'll take a little bit out of each bottle, and we'll just apply that very, very thinly. I mean, like a glaze. Rather than glob it on, this is a very creamy, sort of thick paint. I'll apply some of this on this paper plate here, and then I'll just very lightly apply this as a glaze. And what I'm trying to do is avoid any trace of brush marks. And it dries pretty quickly. If you are going to apply it thickly, like some of those sample boards I showed you just a bit ago, then you need to let the paint dry. It dries to the touch in about, I don't know, 10 minutes or less, but you really want to let it dry for a couple hours according to the directions before applying a second coat. Now this, like I say, is just a really light, sort of a glaze coat there, and even now before it dries, I think I can get that light in there to, it's pretty difficult to see on camera, but it is, I can see it in real life here. It is color shifting. So let me try a different color. Maybe that'll show up better on camera. Get a little bit of this purple. And I'll wipe off this brush. Rinse it a little bit. Okay, same thing. I'm just going to spread this out. You can actually see how the color shift works when I spread this out thinly. Okay, I've just got a little bit on my brush there. And let's do the next letter. And again, it's very, very, very thin coating. Very thin. Let's see if that color shifts a little better on camera. Yeah, now you can see it sort of shift from that purplish blue. And you continue on with each of the colors that you've chosen. Let's take a little bit out here. This one's called Aqua. little bit of that paint out there. Now I bought these large bottles from Hobby Lobby. They were $8.99 a piece, listed as $8.99 a piece. I bought them when they were 50% off, and you can buy the smaller bottles. I think they're 2-ounce bottles for about half that price anyway. So shop around and watch for sales on this stuff. Just apply a very light coat here. This is the aqua. So this effect is very subtle, and after this is applied, it's very thin. It's almost not noticeable at first glance, but the person is looking at one of your projects and it's got this applied to it. It's what I call the subtle surprise, because it's something that no one really expects to see, this type of effect. So as long as I got this aqua, let me just set this aside. You get the idea. I'm going to take this hummingbird and let's give a little bit of aqua color to the hummingbird's breast there. Okay. And normally I'd probably let that sit for a couple minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of this greenish color. Put some of that out. Now I went a little bit over that leaf, so let me just clean that up. Since this already has a finish applied to it, it's really no problem to wipe off any mistakes there. So you can see I'm already getting sort of that color shift effect there. And let me go into some of this yellow. And we'll put a little yellow on this flower here. And some on his beak, or her beak. All right, it looks like we've got enough highlights there on our hummingbird, and you can see that just adds a little bit of pop to this project rather than just have it all stained one color. So we've got our very simple box, and add a little bit of interest with this color shift paint. So I've got some other projects in mind for this technique. It might involve butterflies and dragonflies. We'll see. This next finishing technique is a faux leather finish, and as you know, real leather can come in all kinds of different textures and colors and so forth, and it's nothing that I haven't done before, but I've done it on walls, like in one of our bathrooms in our home. I've done a faux leather finish on a wall, and I'm just going to show you briefly on a couple of scraps of wood here how to do a faux leather finish, and you can adapt that to a different texture and a look just by changing the tools. You might have a couple of stipple brushes there, stiff brushes, some makeup sponges, that you get at a drugstore or whatever. I've got sea foam or sea sponges here as well to add a little texture. So it's just a sort of an interactive process. It might not even hurt to have a couple of reference photos with you nearby for just a reminder what kind of leather look you want to have. I'm just going to pick a few colors of this acrylic paint, and I'll try this starburst design. Both of these scraps of wood, I just put a couple of coats of 50/50 shellac with sanding in between, just make them smooth. And then this one I did sort of a starburst look to it with acrylic paints, darker around the edges, and then I'll apply a fake finish for simulating leather. So I'm going to just start by dabbing this on. This is a sort of a medium brown color, and I think I'm going to do a little bit more around the edges here since I've got this sort of a starburst look to it. And let me get a really light brown, sort of a tan, and I'll just dab that in there a bit too. So as you can see, as you sort of pounce these colors together, you can actually imagine that this is a piece of real leather. Put a little more dark around there too to retain that sort of starburst finish look. And if you want to, you can use your sea sponge and go over a little bit. Now these sea sponges are dampened slightly. I dunked them in water and then just squeeze them out, so it helps to blend these paints in. So something like this I can imagine could be used on say box sides, something like that, something where you want to simulate a faux leather covering around the edges there of the box. And I'm just going to add just a few little more speckles here just to give a little bit more texture to that faux leather finish. As you can see, this is a very, very easy process. Sort of a random look to it, but when it's dry, of course, you can apply your final finish coat to it and have a fairly realistic look of leather. Now this one I'm going to go ahead and paint some of this darker brown over the surface. So we'll have a dark base coat, darker base coat. And I'll just get a little bit more of this dark brown. This is even darker yet. And sort of blend that together with our lighter medium brown. Okay, once I've got that coverage there, of course these are just scraps, but I'll use the sea sponge to give a little bit of blending to that. In this case, if I were to use a solid color where I really want to be solid, I would have applied the dark brown paint, maybe a blend of the medium dark and the darker brown. Let that dry and then apply my lighter colors over it. I'm going to use this different shade of brown called, I think it's called Honey Brown. I'm going to dip that into the sea sponge and go over that just like this. All right, so that is all there is to it for a simulated leather finish. It almost, to me, now that I'm looking at it, almost looks sort of like a burl wood too. You know, there's an old technique I saw years ago. I'm going to try it real quick, get my hands dirty, where you really were trying to simulate burl wood, and that was just take your thumb and sort of twist it. I'm just going to try that. This was not planned at all. Well, there's another finishing idea for you. Get your thumb dirty and make some burl wood. Huh. Well, how about that? All right, let me show you the next painting technique. This next finishing technique will be simulating a denim weave, like on a pair of blue jeans, something like that. And you can see here that I've taken a board and tried different colors. I tried this midnight blue, that's this one right there, and tried this Liberty blue for more of a lighter colored jeans, and then I also just kind of blended them together. So in this particular case, I'm going to go with the midnight blue, and I'm going to apply a thinned version, thin it with a little water, it's just acrylic paint. I've already painted this sample board white. That's our base coat, and that's what will shine through or show through when we do the sort of weave pattern. And I've got a variety of different stiff brushes. This is just a scrub brush, got a denture brush, an unclean brush here, and a regular toothbrush. And the idea is to go one direction, allow that to dry, and then once that's dry, then we'll go the other direction. Some of the weaves, when I've looked at a pair of jeans, looks like they almost have a diagonal pattern to them as well. So I'll leave that up to you to decide whether or not you want to do the crisscross and a diagonal pattern or not. We'll just see how this comes out. And so I'll start with a bit of this midnight blue on a paper plate, and then I'll thin it with a little bit of water. And I'll go ahead and paint this over our white base coat. Okay, I just want to take a little of that excess paint off. Grab a paper towel here and just wipe off some of that, sort of pre-striate this. Okay. And let's try our denture brush and see how that works. That's not bad. That works pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and try this scrub brush just to see what it looks like. And let's just try the toothbrush. Yeah, I think that's going to be too narrow. We'll go ahead and use a scrub brush, or this denture brush worked pretty well too. You can see I'm trying to go as straight as I can. Now, being acrylic paint, of course, it's going to dry fairly fast. So I've got my stripes going, this weave start with the stripes going one direction. We'll let that dry and come back and go the other direction. Okay, it's been about 15-20 minutes, and that's dry. I'd probably let it dry a bit longer than that. Perhaps I would put even a spray clear coat over this before applying the second coat, but I think I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be a little careful when I apply this second thin coat of the blue. So I just covered up what I had before in some foil just to keep it moist, and get my brush back out. Okay, let's do the same thing again, only this time we're going to go crosshatch direction. You can see I'm applying this more of a dry brush technique here, just to get enough paint there so that we can do our crosshatch for the simulation of the denim. Okay, let's get our brushes here and go across. I'm going to use this stiffer brush here to get a little more of that crosshatch visible. Just wiping off some of the excess here. I think what I'm going to do is to just spritz it a little bit with some water, just to moisten that up a bit. There we go. Okay, that crosshatch is coming through a little bit better now. Let me dab that surface just a teeny tad. And go back over it with our brush. You can see now that it's created this crosshatch pattern like we were looking for. And of course we're applying this second layer of the dark midnight blue, so it comes out more of a denim, a darker denim look to it. Now just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and go at a 45-degree angle just to see if that comes through. I'm going to need to apply more paint, aren't I? Okay, I just dry brushed that paint on, and I've got that crosshatch going side to side and also at that angle. Drag my stiff brush through it. And I think once that's dry, that'll look a lot like a pair of old jeans, and also be a nice, maybe a box lid or the sides of boxes for that denim look. And then combined with some maybe 3D carving of the seams of a denim pair of jeans or a pocket or something like that. I've got a couple projects in mind for this particular technique. So once that dries, this will dull down, and I would apply either a flat or a satin finish overall after it's all dry and the project is completely finished. All right, I hope you enjoyed that denim tutorial, and experiment a little bit on your own. When I first started experimenting with this, I was just using white paper plates and trying out different brushes to see what gave me the best effect. So don't be afraid to either practice on some paper plates, white paper plates, or just some scrap boards painted white like we've done here.